Good morning, everyone, and happy Monday. We are so excited that you're here this morning. You're watching the chat session lineup on the This Way Network. I'm your host, Nina. There's my co-host, Rodney, and we are super excited to have with us today Courtney Dailey, who is the author of a best-selling book on Amazon called God Stories.
Yay!
Yay! Thank you so
Yay,
much for
Courtney,
having me.
welcome. Oh, thank you
I'm
so
so
much
glad to
for
be here.
coming. Now, I have to tell y'all, I've been following Courtney for a while. She popped up in my feed shortly after the disaster with Hurricane Helene in the Appalachians. And I was just looking for information, looking for hope, looking to see what was happening in the aftermath. How was help getting to people? And I not stumbled, I think God led me to Courtney's post. And there was so much hope there and so many amazing, true stories that I started almost right away trying to get in touch with Courtney to say, please come on and tell us some of these stories and talk to us. And in the interim, in the time that we've been waiting for this Q&A to come to fruition, Courtney put all those stories in a book. And
Wow.
it's on Amazon. It's a bestseller. The link is already in the comments. But not only that, y'all, you don't even have to buy the book. I hope you will, because I'd love to see you support Courtney, and I'd love to see this zoom up on Amazon and even more people find it there. But you don't even have to wait for that. You can go listen for free to the entire audiobook on YouTube with Courtney reading it. You just can't get better than that. So the link for that is in the comments too. If you want to go see her on Facebook, then all you have to do is click on that link in the comments and you can go find her and start listening to those God stories as they were happening and as she was reporting them. It will make your day. It is so inspiring to hear how God is showing up different places. There, what an introduction.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Oh, we are so glad you're here. So, Courtney, help me know how all this got started in your mind. I mean, in my mind, it's like, okay, there was the Hurricane Helene disaster, and that's what got the ball rolling. Is that true? Or was there something even before that we don't know about?
I had been writing books. I wanted to be a Christian author, and I'd been writing books for a couple of years before this all happened. Christian fiction books, not nonfiction, but fiction books. And I had an agent, but I'd gotten a ton of rejections, and I had been praying every single day for like 2 years, every single morning. God, just please help for me to be a bright light and have massive impact, a bright light and have massive impact. And I was trying to have speaking engagements and talk to people about the Lord. And I had like 600 followers on Facebook, but I was doing my newsletter. I was writing. I was trying to speak as much as I could. And when Hurricane Helene hit, we had one of our dear friends, Jerry. Y'all hear me talk about him a lot on the videos. Jerry was 69 years old. He was about to turn 70, and he's a dear family friend. We kind of adopted him into our family. He comes to all of our family holidays and everything. And his part of town had been just wiped out because Hurricane Helene dumped 29 inches of rainfall into the mountains overnight. And the day after it came through, this wall of water charged out of the mountains into the valley of Hampton and Valley Forge, and people who didn't even live in floodplains, who had no idea this was coming, went from like Jerry, he had made a post on Facebook and he had like 6 inches of water in his yard. And then we just didn't hear from him again. Like we saw the picture, but cell phone service went out and we had heard it was really bad. So we had been looking for him. And about 48 hours after it hit, I drove with my daughter. My husband was volunteering with his excavator at the fire department. I drove with my daughter to his house to try to find him. And when we pulled onto the street, I don't know if you guys have seen the movie Twister, the original Twister movie, where they go into Wakita and there's just the piles of belongings on the sides of the road. It was like a war zone. And when we found Jerry, he was standing in his yard, and the only set of clothes he still owned, and he was in tennis shoes with no socks because he had lost everything, and he was just crying. And when I saw his house, I was like, well, it's not that bad. I mean, he had half of a neighbor's house parked in his front yard. 5 of his collector vehicles had washed away. But from the front, I thought, okay, we can do this. This is going to be fine. And he led me around to the back of the house. And I saw that when the water came charging down his street, it busted through his bedroom window. And he was at his garage at the time, thankfully, just up the hill. And he said it literally, and this everybody on the street says the same thing. It went from being this deep to being 3 or 4 feet deep within 30 seconds. And what had happened is there was a lumber mill just up the road, and all that water coming out of the mountains had backed up behind all the logs. And when it broke and gave way, it was like a dam breaking. So the water just shot up quickly. So he had like 5 feet of tree limbs and logs in his bedroom. He had lost, everything. His dryer was in the middle of the living room floor. His washing machine was gone. His deep freezer was gone. His propane tank had washed away. And the whole back of his house was open like the back of a dollhouse, to where you could just see inside, but there was hardly anything left. All of his family photos, antiques, all of his family heirlooms, like everything was destroyed. And he was like, well, Courtney, do you think we can rebuild? Because my husband's a builder. He's a contractor. And he's like, what do you think? Which I know nothing. Okay. I just tag along. So like, I know nothing. But he said, what do you think we can do this? And I mean, there was foundation damage on the back. I was thinking, we're going to have to tear this down. And he said, I don't have flood insurance and I don't have savings. Like, what am I going to do? And that was, it's so hard to talk about because we were just so worried about him. And that night I went home and my husband was like, where have you been? Because, we couldn't call. Nobody had cell service. So we couldn't talk. We had power at our house. When I got home that night, I just fell onto the bed. I just bawled. I couldn't talk because I couldn't tell him about what I had seen at Jerry's house. And I said, Paul, my husband's name's Paul. I said, Paul, we got to do something. We've got to build back his house. There's got to be some way. And I started telling him about the foundation damage and all the furniture he had lost, how he had no belongings. He was staying in an apartment that a friend was letting him stay in up the road, but he was only able to stay there for like 2 months. He had like 2 months that he could stay there. And my husband said, Courtney, the stuff you're telling me right now, it's going to be like $100,000 to build back his house. He was like, we can't afford that. There's no way. And he said, but we know with God, all things are possible. And that night we prayed, we both cried and we prayed, God, please, we can't do this. You see how that we're hurting. The community is hurting. Help us build back Jerry's house. And the very next day, school was out for like 2 weeks. So we woke the kids up and we got our rubber boots and shovels and stuff and went down, and we were like, well, we'll do what we can. So we started mucking out Jerry's house, and my husband took his excavator and he was, hauling off the broken houses and cars and all of the debris. And we hadn't been there 15 minutes and we had about a dozen people show up in rubber boots with shovels, and they started helping us muck out the house. And we started hearing all this rumbling, and I looked out the windows and there were excavators and skid steers and dump trucks, locals, I mean dozens of them, taking the day off work, bringing their own fuel, just coming to help their neighbors. Every single person who showed up at that house had a Bible verse or a Jesus t-shirt on. Every single person who helped. And through the day, whenever, like, we got done mucking out the whole house, we had a plumber show up, rigged the water line from the road. Somebody else showed up with a pressure washer so we could start washing out the house. Then we got all that done. We had a contractor show up who said, I think I could save the house. He started nailing 2x4s, climbing all over the house. And he came back and said, hey, is structurally sound, it can be saved. We had a team of 12 women show up and start ripping out drywall with our bare hands because we had no tools. And a lot of these women were in like their pretty white tennis shoes. We didn't have all the stuff that we needed, but they were just willing people who loved the Lord and loved their neighbors and wanted to help. So I was standing on the bathroom sink in Jerry's bathroom, ripping out drywall overhead, just with my bare hands. And I said, man, I wish we had a crowbar. Like if I just had a crowbar. And somebody said, oh, I saw one. There's one out in the yard. And I was like, seriously? And I said, yeah, did you see a ladder? And somebody else said, oh yeah, there's a ladder out there too. And I went out to the front yard and there was a ladder and 3 crowbars laying side by side in the middle of all the debris right there.
Wow.
So I brought him back in. I'm like handing him out to the ladies. And this guy busts through the front door and he had driven from like 40 minutes away with his family. He said, hey, you guys need tools? And we were like, yes. He's like, hang on, I got tools. He went to his truck, started bringing in hammers, screwdrivers. When we got thirsty, somebody showed up on a skid steer with cases of water. When we were hungry, somebody showed up in a pickup truck full of hot meals. It was the middle of the afternoon. And I cried the whole day. Jerry was sitting by the road in like one of those little camping chairs because he couldn't watch. He couldn't see. We were sorting through photos.
Yeah.
Clothes.
Wow.
And it was so
He had
hard.
to have been emotionally overwhelmed. Just
Yeah, he was. He was just staring off into space. And I went up to him and he was like, I just can't believe all the people, who've been here today. And I said, yeah, I wish we had a backhoe. And as soon as I said the word backhoe, this guy pulls into the driveway on a backhoe and opens the window and said, do you guys need some help? And Jerry and I just broke down. We just started bawling.
Wow.
And it was just, it was everything. It was just, that's not even all of it. That's not even everything that happened. But that first day was like, okay, God is here. God heard our prayer.
Sure.
He has shown up. So that night I was driving home and I was crying all the way home and I was covered in mud and I had like the drywall in my hair and I was just nasty. But I told the kids when we got home, I said, y'all have got to go in the house because I have to make a video about what God has done today. And I sat in my car in my garage and I had 600 followers, y'all. And it was like the snottiest, most ridiculous video I've ever made in my life. It was 5 minutes long and I'm bawling my eyes out and like wiping my nose and I got like mud under my fingernails. But I was telling everybody about all of the things that God had done. And I was showing the videos of Jerry's house and just talking about how moved we were by God moving. And we got up the next morning. Of course, I posted it because we had Wi-Fi and electricity at our house. And the next morning we got up and I got the kids and we were like, all right, let's go back down to Jerry's. Same thing. We worked all day. I came home that night and the video had gotten like 6,000 views. And I told my husband, I was like, oh my goodness, because that was like the most views I'd ever had. I was like, this is nuts. And I had like 50 messages from people saying, I have a couch. I can help with this. I've got a construction crew. Can we come and help? And I was just replying to messages like, this is nuts. We went to bed that night and we were just praying, thanking God for sending us things that we needed, just one step at a time. I got up the next morning and the video was at 70,000 views.
70,000.
70.
Whoa.
And I started getting ready and I was freaking out because it was just my phone, the top of the screen was just ding, ding, just message after. And my heart was pounding and I was just bawling because I knew this was a God thing. This didn't make any sense. I had 600 followers. Like, this doesn't happen. This is the God thing. And by the time I left the house, it was up to 120,000 views. And I drove into Hampton looking for Jerry. And of course, no cell service, so I couldn't call him. He wasn't at his house. I was driving down the roads in Hampton, just bawling my eyes out, listening to praise music, just crying and like screaming praises to God. It's a miracle I didn't wreck and run off the road. And I finally passed him and I was flashing my lights. And he pulled over and got out. And I was like, Jerry, he said, what is going on? What wrong with you? Because I was bawling. I said, that video I made, it went viral, and there's all these people, and they want to rebuild your house. I mean, I was just bawling. And Jerry was bawling. We were jumping up and down on the side of the road like crazy people. And we set up a
Wow.
fund through our church because it was insane. Within like 2 days, we had like $10,000. And I was like,
Mhm.
I don't know what to do. I called the church secretary in a panic, and I was like, I don't want any of this coming to me. Like, we need to make sure God gets the glory. We want God to get the glory.
Mhm.
So we set up this fund through the church so people could donate, and they would get their tax acknowledgement, and it was legit, and people would know that we weren't scammers, because we're unfortunately
Right,
a lot of
right.
scammers that popped up after the hurricane. And the money just started pouring in. But it wasn't just the money. Every day I would go home and connect to the Wi-Fi and reply to hundreds of messages every single day with people. There was a lady in Maryland who wanted to donate the bathroom vanities. There was a guy out of Georgia who wanted to do the insulation and drywall. And there was somebody out of California who wanted to do the flooring. Somebody in Virginia was doing the kitchen cabinets. And we had so many donated supplies and work crews. People were sending entire work crews and paying for them to come work for the week. And we were like, we're not going to have to use the funds. Like, we have the donations and the volunteers. We don't even have to touch the money. So we started going down the street because everybody on that street was hit in some way.
Wow.
And so many of these people, they had tons of help, but they needed more. And we were able to go house to house and start asking people, okay, what is your name? What is, how many kids do you have? What do you need? And people were the second house that we adopted. I'll never forget. We walked in and I said, what's your immediate need? And she looked at me and she was like, a car. Like, she looked at me like, okay, lady, like, what are you? And we had somebody from church donate a car for her the next day. And it was amazing. So we
Amazing.
had so many funds and materials and stuff. And we started assigning one house to one church. So a church could adopt a home, adopt a family, and help oversee everything and get them everything they needed to get back in their home.
Wonderful.
And
I
it
love
just,
that.
it was just crazy. It was crazy. That video ended up getting over 5 million views. And now today, God has sent us over $1 million in donations, in addition to the thousands of volunteers. We just had a couple here from Vermont week before last, and we just took on our 23rd house this week, and it's still going. We just had another vehicle donated last Wednesday. I mean, it's still moving and it's still going. And we never thought, like, we were trying to help our friend. Like, we prayed for this and God did this, and he's still doing. And it's when we were like, I guess we were probably 6 months in, and all these people started messaging me, you need to write a book called God Stories. And I was like, we're building houses. I don't do nonfiction. That's not my calling, right? We all think that our will is God's will sometimes. And that was my mistake, not seeing that God was putting it right in front of my face. And just the Bible studies too that were happening, or still happening in that Facebook inbox, are unreal.
Wow.
Sorry, that was really long. I just get really
No, I loved all of it. And it's just so incredible to hear all of it and to see how God has grown it so exponentially. It's like from that little seed you were talking about, now there is an enormous apple tree and people are eating from the fruit everywhere. It's just incredible. I want to go back to something you said, because you got your church involved and you got other churches involved. And I think this was about the moment I probably saw that first video, and I started following you on the strength of that. But I loved seeing how the churches were getting involved. And the thing that was so exciting to me was how God was growing people's faith.
Yes.
As he was doing this, not just individuals, but even churches. And there was one story in particular that I remember, and I even saved this video. I think I shared this one on my own Facebook, because you talked about how um, there was a church. I'm not sure which one it
Mm.
was, but the church had raised funds to build a church building. I think they
Mm.
didn't have a church building, or the old church building needed to be raised. It was so in such bad shape. And they were raising funds to build a new church building. And then this disaster happened. And they put their own plans on hold and said, no, we think God wants us to use all of this to help these
Wow.
people rebuild their homes. And then tell them how God responded to that.
Oh, it was so cool. There were quite a few homes where we were working that had to be torn down completely, complete
Wow.
rebuilds.
Mhm.
And we had been going out and looking for big churches to take on these big projects, because that's the way the human mind thinks, right? We don't
Right.
we don't think like the Lord. The Lord uses little David. He doesn't use big Goliath. But we were soliciting all these big churches, and everybody kept telling us, no, no, we can't. And I was so frustrated. And it was a
Mhm.
day it was October, that morning, which it was another God story. The second home that our church adopted, they were out of kerosene, and everybody was running generators, trying to get their homes dried
Mhm.
out and all the mud and the mold killed and everything, so we could start
Mhm.
rebuilding after the cleanup. And they
Mhm.
said, Courtney, we need kerosene. And it was outrageous. Kerosene was so expensive. And it was
Mhm.
like an hour later, I was sitting in Jerry's front yard, and all these trucks rolled onto the street. And the truck beds and trailers were full of jugs of kerosene and kerosene heaters. And it was this little church out of Louisa, Kentucky. It's Meads Branch Free Will Baptist Church. They have like
Mm.
150 members. It's not a huge church, but they had been watching the news, seen all the disaster, and they started praying, saying,
Mhm.
okay, how can we help these people? And they decided, we're
Wow.
going to buy kerosene. So, like a month before they showed up, maybe a few weeks before, they had all been praying and raising money and buying kerosene. And they showed up on exactly the day that we needed it. Well,
Wow.
they were going like house to house, praying with people, meeting everybody. Like, they were just the most awesome, strong Christian men, just awesome guys. After they got back home, they went to the church and said, we want to commit to rebuilding 2 of these homes. And
Wow.
I mean, with 150 members. Yeah. And they had been saving up because they were going to build their new church building, and they had all these plans to get started. And they said, instead of doing that, let's concentrate all of our efforts on helping these folks. So he called me and said,
Mhm.
Courtney, we're committing to rebuilding these 2 homes. It was so cool because I got to call the homeowners and tell them that they
Oh.
were getting brand new homes. You talk about what an awesome privilege to get to be the messenger, get to tell somebody,
Mhm.
hey, God's
Oh,
building
of
you
course.
a brand new home. People who didn't know what they were going to do. And they cried. It was amazing. So these guys started working, and they were down here. I mean, it's a 3.5 hour drive, and they were building
From
2
Louisville,
homes
Kentucky to
from Louisa, Kentucky down to where, yeah. So they
wow.
were sending church members and driving back and forth and trying to get materials coordinated and all that. It was a lot of work. And I guess it was in May. It was in May that one of the deacons from the church, I talk about him in the book, Jamie and Michael were my main
Mhm.
contacts. That was the minister and then one of the deacons. Jamie called me and he said, are you sitting down? Because I have got a God story for you. And I was like, okay.
Wow.
He said, we were down there this past week, and we were at this meeting with some of the other people who are, doing recovery work and stuff. And after the meeting, this lady came up to us and said, are you the church that put your church build on hold to come down here and build new homes? They were like, yeah, we are. And she said, well, I'm with the Mississippi Nailbenders. Have you heard of them? They were like, no. And she said, well, every year we take on a building project that's for a nonprofit or somebody who needs something. She said, and our project that we had lined up, they had it lined up for like 3 weeks from that date. She said it just fell through, and we have all these volunteers scheduled and all these building materials, and we have nowhere to go. Can we
Wow.
rebuild your church? So the Mississippi
Wow.
Nailbenders ended up coming in and building Meads Branch Free Will Baptist Church, a brand new building. And we all just cried because you can't outgive God. And when you have a
Absolutely.
plan that you're going to do something, and which is a blessing, a new church building is a tremendous blessing, but they
Hmm.
put that on hold to serve and love others, which is what God calls us to do, is to serve and
Yes.
love,
Yeah.
serve and love. And when they did that, God took care of the church building.
Wow.
And took care of the people that they had gone to serve. I mean,
Right.
yeah,
That's
God is
beautiful.
not limited. He isn't confined to just doing the little thing that you prayed for.
Yeah, that's
You
exactly.
know, Courtney, one of the beautiful things, listen to these stories, it's just a reminder that every church and every community, the network of the body of Christ, if we work that way, could you imagine if we work that way consistently, that the need and not only just sometimes it's not just money, it's actually lending a hand or giving people a skill set so that they could take care of themselves. And that's, you know, I'm working with a group of people, and that's one of the things that we're trying to do is to get people equipped to be able to have a skill set, to be able to go on, not only just to help themselves, but to help someone else or take care of their family or their community. So this is really a blessing to hear this.
It is. It's what's amazing is
Mhm.
it wasn't one church or one
Right.
denomination. And I watched people volunteer and work alongside each other who I know used to argue and nitpick about differences and
Mhm.
Hmm.
beliefs. But when
Hmm.
everybody came together and they were all working and their focus was on loving these people
Right.
and
Hmm.
giving, nobody had the time or the energy to argue or to focus on any of that stuff. Everybody was unified. And a lot of the houses that they
Right.
worked in, you would go out onto the job site and it was like a worship service. Everyone was talking about the Lord. They were sharing their testimonies. They were praying together in the front yard. They were crying together. And on all of these job sites, a lot of people we would bring Sharpies and people would sign their names and where they were from and leave a Bible verse. And
Wow.
Jerry's
On
house,
the, are you talking about like on the studs of the
on the
walls?
studs of the house, on the studs of the walls.
That's a blessing.
It's so cool. Jerry and I, we joke about it because his house, we wrote out the whole story. That in 2024, we put it on one of the headers right in the middle of the house. That
Hmm.
Hurricane
Hmm.
Helene came through, and God sent all of these volunteers and the funds to rebuild. And then the names and stuff are all over. And I said, man, wouldn't that be a cool book to write? Somebody who tears this house apart someday, or who rebuilds or remodels, and here's a
Hmm.
testimony, telling what the Lord has done in this place for future generations.
Wow.
I love that. I just love
Mhm.
that.
It's so cool. We've seen
Yeah.
people from all over the place. I mean, we had volunteers from Wisconsin. They drove in 4 times. They made 4 trips. We had people from Texas, California. We had a guy drive a
Mm.
box truck from Oklahoma and work for a solid week. And the people who gave, we've
Wow.
had people in Australia, Thailand, Iceland. I mean, just crazy. It went all over
Wow.
the world, and it was like only God could do that.
Mm.
For sure.
That's
For
incredible.
sure. That's part of the reason I wanted to have you on because these are not little stories.
No.
There
Yeah.
are little things in it that are very personal to the people that they happen to. I remember, I think one of your posts was talking about, I want to say it was finding someone's Bible or
Oh yeah.
something. Yeah, can you tell
Wow.
us that story?
Yes, there was a lady at the end of the street that she was really devastated. The water had gotten up about 3 or 4 feet in their house. They had just remodeled their kitchen. They had
Ooh.
all brand new kitchen cabinets. All the appliances were ruined. And a lot of the homes we would have to come in and gut from 4 or 5 feet down. Some of them were complete tear downs, but a lot of them were just four or
Mhm.
5 feet down. We had to gut everything, all new bathrooms, all new kitchens. And she was stranded on the bed with her husband and their German Shepherd. And the water came up level with the mattress, but they were stuck there for hours, just terrified, not knowing what they were going to do. Well, she had lost her mom the year before, and her
Mm.
mom's purse and Bible and some of those things that she had held on to had gotten washed away in the flood. Well, this was, oh man, it wasn't even a couple of months ago. She messaged me and said, "You are never going to believe this. We had this lady show up and knock on our front door, and she found my mom's Bible." And it was just outside of the landfill. I mean, and this was like miles away, and stuff had been hauled off, but they found some of the names and the information that were written in the family Bible and tracked them down and brought her the Bible back. So there were just
What a blessing.
so, what a blessing. So many things like that. And the people who have committed their lives to Christ through
Mhm.
all of this, that's been the thing. Not and not just the homeowners. We had one guy who showed up on a job site. I won't tell too many specifics because I don't want to get in trouble for revealing this, but we had a guy show up on a job site, and he had driven in, and he wasn't a Christian man, but he wanted to come and volunteer. He was a good man. He wanted to serve others and be a blessing. So he drove in, and he showed up on the job site the first day, and he was cussing like a sailor. I mean, he was used to being with work crews where they did that
Mhm.
sort of thing, and those guys who worked with him the whole week just loved on him and prayed with him and talked to him about Jesus. And by the time he left, he said, "I want to come back, and I want you to baptize me in the very river that caused all this to happen."
Wow.
I mean, there's so many people. I watched a guy recommit his life to Christ while my husband was loading the last pieces of his home into a dump truck. I mean, there were just so many people who, once all of this happened, they realized, hey, there's more to this life than stuff. And
Right.
there's a calling. And when they saw the blessings of the Christians coming in and loving on each other, that's that's the thing. Like, it's great to be evangelistic and share Jesus with people. But when you love on people,
Mhm.
that's when Jesus shines through, and people start asking questions about Jesus when you
Yep.
just love on them. It points them to him when you just love on them.
Well, I
I
think
love that.
one of the biggest things is when people see, you know, something that's just not the norm. I mean, you just don't see that type of outpouring of love in our everyday lives. But when you see this flow and you see these blessings start to really overtake people, and it's not by chance. I mean, you know that this is God moving
Yeah.
because you couldn't pay for that type of stuff to go together. You couldn't pay for the elements to come together. And so, it's really funny. Sometimes people seem to be very surprised about things, but you know, I know the Lord can do such amazing things like that. So when I see it, I'm like, yep, I know what that is. I know what that is. I mean, I call it just like I see it. I'm like, yeah, that's not a fluke. This was meant to be.
It's a God thing.
Mhm.
Yeah,
It's
That's
a
that's
right.
God thing, and these
and
are
it's like
God stories. Yeah.
they are. And it's like the more faith that we had, the more that we stepped out, the more he kept doing it. And he kept showing us just how big we had. Like, it was I guess the first or second week that we were working on Jerry's house, and somebody paid for a framing crew to come
Mm,
in, and his house was rotten. It's the guys, when they started working on the house, they said this house would have collapsed in two to
wow.
3 years if Hurricane Helene hadn't
Wow.
come through, which was another God thing. It was like, what would Jerry have done
Mhm.
then?
Hey.
So
Mhm.
they were working though, and they were kind of rough. They were construction guys. It wasn't like they were a youth group or a church group. Like, they were construction guys who
Mhm.
had just been paid for the week. So they were listening to some rough music. There was some rough language. And like the first day, one of the guys came to me and he said, we're going to have to hold up. I forgot my drill. And I was like, just wait. Just wait. And he was like, what do you mean just wait? And I was like, God will send a drill. Like, he's been doing this all day, every day. Just wait, it'll happen. And he was like, okay. And then he was like, text the boss and tell him we need a drill. So it wasn't
Mhm.
5 minutes later, I looked up and Jerry was walking across the yard with a drill. And I was like, where did that come from? And he said, somebody from my church just drove up and said, thought you guys might could use a drill today. And the guy
Wow.
came to me the very next day and he said, okay, we're going to have a lot more 2x4s. Like this, it's bad. Like we're having to replace so much of the wood. And I said, okay, how many do you need? And we just started getting funds in. So we were kind of skittish about spending and we were trying to be frugal and be careful. And he said, we need 98 2x4s. And I was like, oh, okay, let me see. And we were going to be held up on progress, which I hated being held up on progress because I knew Jerry didn't have a lot of time to get back into his house and everything. So I picked up my phone and we had service back and I was like scrolling through my phone trying to find who's got 2x4s. And I hear this clatter and I look up and there's a pickup truck backing into Jerry's driveway and the bed of it is full of 2x4s. And I hadn't even made the call yet. And I ran over, the guy had his window down and I said, are these for us? He said, yeah, I guess. I said, where did they come from? And he said, some guy from North Dakota called the local hardware store up in Bluntville and asked if he could donate 2x4s to people who were impacted by the flood this morning. I said, how many are here? He said, 100. And those guys, they started seeing it happening because, of course, it was happening all day, every day. And I kept seeing them look at each other and look at each other like, what is happening here? And it was the last day that they were on the job site. And we had set up a tent in Jerry's front yard because his yard kind of became like the hub. We had snacks and hazmat suits and masks and first aid kits, everything you can imagine. And people would come and gather there. They would pray. Jerry had saved one sign from his house that said blessed. And he had one of the volunteers do zip ties and attach it to the front of the tent. So people would come to the blessed tent and they would pray and share their stories and stuff. So we were all under the tent and another church had adopted the house 2 doors down. And this guy who was over the project walked into the tent and he said, Courtney, we need kitchen cabinets. This is going to be expensive. Do you know of anybody? Is there somebody who has donated? And I looked down at my phone, and as soon as I looked at it, I had a message scroll across the top of the screen that said, hi, Courtney. My name's Abe, and I'm a custom cabinet builder.
Wow.
And I couldn't even talk. I just held out the phone to the tent. And those rough construction guys were pulling their T-shirts up over their noses, just bawling because they had witnessed the power of the Lord all week, just seeing his miracles one right after the next.
Everybody, you're watching the chat session here on the This Way Network. We got a wonderful guest on today. Her name is Courtney DAILEY. She actually is the author of God's Stories. What a wonderful book. You know, this is, we were talking about how this all kind of got started, but the stories that you're telling is something that could be a wonderful documentary. It could be a wonderful Christian film. I think, you know, a lot of times I've been involved in the entertainment industry for many years. And in Hollywood, they say, oh, there are no new stories. That's not true, because this is something fresh and new, and it's real. It's really real. And I mean, this is amazing. God's stories. I like that.
And to know that these stories are repeated over and over and over again, house after house, person after person. The scripture verse I keep thinking about as you're telling these stories is the people who sat in darkness have seen a great light.
Yes.
Yes. All those people in Appalachia who were sitting in darkness, you know, with no power, many of them with no hope, having lost everything. And they're seeing a great light, and God is bringing hope and revival to his people, but also salvation to so many others that didn't know him before.
Yes.
This is just tremendous. This is what the Christian life is supposed to be.
Yeah.
That's right.
And could be if we believed him fully and wholly and gave ourselves over to loving him and loving other people.
Yeah.
The way he does.
That's what it's all about. I know well, I'll tell this story. I had a guy who was messaging me. It was actually, I'm sorry. I had a lady who was messaging me. And it was like it had been a couple of months and she was talking about trying to find God again and find her faith and how she'd been struggling. And because a lot of those messages were volunteers, but a lot of them were people struggling with their faith who just wanted to talk to somebody about God or have somebody pray with them.
Well, I can imagine.
And we had been communicating for a while. And she messaged me one night and said, I have something to tell you. I'm not a woman. I'm actually a man. And I struggle with gender identity. And I've been listening to all these stories and I've been reading my Bible and I've realized I need to get my life right. And I need to make things right with my wife.
Oh.
And when I read that message, I just broke down, and my husband was like, I cried every night when I read my messages. My husband's like, why are you crying now? And I said, I just realized God isn't calling us to rebuild homes. This actually has nothing to do with rebuilding homes. God is calling us to shine his light and his love on hurting people who are seeking him. That was the whole entire point. And we thought it was about rebuilding homes, and it was about so much more than that. Just so many people who have been touched by his blessings, by his light. Like you were saying, we have a couple of favorite verses. Matthew 19:26, with men this is impossible, but with God all things are possible. I love, I mean, everybody who has me sign their book, I write that verse in their book because it's so powerful. And I think is it Ephesians 3:20 and 21. Now to him that is able to do exceedingly abundantly above all that we ask or think, because there are so many things that we asked for that were just teeny tiny. And here it is. It's 14 months later, y'all. It's still going. It's still happening. And the miracle stories, the stuff is, we just keep looking around, and now there's a few of the volunteers. It's like me and a deacon from my church, another guy. None of us really knew each other before this happened. And we all have this little group chat, and we just share the resources, and we all approve. Like if there's a need, we have everybody say, okay, yes. Because we try to just, so there's accountability and we know what's going on, and we can keep track of all the work and everything. And all of us in that chat who are doing this work, our faith has quadrupled just watching everything that God is still doing. And we just a few weeks ago, we were like, we're still getting all these funds. People are still sending funds. Every time we get a big check, and the church secretary is like, oh, we just got more. Sure enough, something will show up that week that's about the exact amount of what we need. And it's just amazing. It really is.
And here's the thing. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Nina. No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, here's the thing. Do y'all see any headlines in the news? Do you see anything on, it's not out there. So God doing this, laying it on people's hearts to send things and bring things and come, and it's still going on 14 months later when the media coverage has long since died off. This is obviously still God, so much bigger. Yeah.
Well, I have to tell you, me personally, well, that's why we have the This Way Network here and the chat session, because, these type of stories, we're doing our best, with our wonderful show to be able to tell these stories. I come from major media. I used to work for ABC News here in Los Angeles, and it was really funny when working there in the news. I was at the assignment desk. So we would get all of these press releases and faxes. And so I'm the guy, I'm going through them, and I got to give them to the assignment editor. And so, and there were stories like this, but it's sad to say that the major media companies, they're just not looking for these beautiful stories. Maybe they're just, they for whatever reason, they deem them not as impactful for whatever reason. And I really believe that there needs to be a network that tells these good stories. I mean, really not just fluffy stuff, but the grit of where somebody hit rock bottom and how they came up again. I think, and matter of fact, that's something that I've always, a lot of times I don't say somebody ought to do this. I'm always saying, Lord, send me, I'll go.
Right.
And Lord, I tell you, the Lord bless me with there was a network, literally a nationwide network that recently sold. It's a story. I'm not going to get into the particulars of it, but I mean, it was the thing had a distribution nationwide, and it was only like $12 million because they just bailed on the network. One of my friends used to be a sport reporter for this network, and someone bought it and just took the news element away, turned it into like a movie channel. And I'm like, no, why? Why? You had the platform for news. Why not, bring these positive stories out and let people be inspired and be informed? People, sometimes you hear people and they say, well, where is God? I'm like, same place he's always been. He's here then,
Everywhere.
now, and
Yeah.
forevermore. What are you talking about where he's at? I mean, I'm like, but people blow me away with that. Sometimes you hear people say that, and I'm like, I understand things are bad, but you are an example. Your stories are an example that Christ is always working. He's always on the job. He ain't forgot nobody. It just, and it's amazing. I hear people and I just kind of look at them. I'm like, yeah, hopefully you'll understand, and I try to share the light, but man, good gracious, people, they really miss the joy of what you're talking about. This whole beautiful experience of everyone there in Appalachia, how they were helped and they came through in this tough time. But everybody, you got to see this. This is actually Miss Dailey here talking about her wonderful book and an opportunity where you can actually hear everything for free.
Yes.
Okay, the day is finally here. God Stories is free and available today for the whole entire world. So I've been working on this audiobook for the last couple of weeks. It is finally done. It is uploaded to my YouTube channel and I'm going to post the link. So all you have to do is click on the link. You don't have to have a YouTube account. You don't have to pay anything. You click the link and it takes you right to the book and you can listen to me very unprofessionally sobbing my way through the reading of the entire story. Maybe you know someone who couldn't afford to buy the book, or maybe they have bad eyesight or they have a hard time reading. This way, anyone from anywhere can access these stories and listen to what God has done in this place. And my hope and my prayer in doing this is that so many people are reached and that they will be as impacted as we've been watching God move through this entire ministry. God is so good, and I just want to share these stories with the world. Thank you so much. Happy Tuesday. We did it. Okay.
Wow.
Yay.
Wonderful.
I'm so glad that you made that available, and I pray that God will bless it and send it out everywhere, and that people will be reading all about what God has been doing.
Yes, that's the whole thing. I know I woke up one morning, I told my husband, I said, I feel like I need to make a free book. Like we need to do this on YouTube, just make an audiobook because everybody should hear these stories. And somebody else said to me, that's not very smart for book sales. And I'm like, what are you talking? Like, you can't outgive God. What are you talking about? Like, it doesn't matter. Like, this is,
Right.
people just need to hear these stories because I know how they have changed my heart and opened my eyes to things every single day that I wasn't seeing before. Because we all have God stories in our lives every single
That's
day.
right.
But we're busy. We have to-do lists. There's always something going on. And I think a lot of times we get blinded to the miracles we're all experiencing every single day.
Yes, yes, I totally agree with you about that. And I'm so glad you brought that up because we've only got just about 10 minutes left. I can't believe we breezed through this that fast. But I wanted to ask, what is the impact What impact has this had on your own faith, on your family, and on your church?
Nina, you had to ask me a question that was going to make me cry.
Hey, you made me cry at the beginning, so this is fair.
There aren't words for what it has done for me, for my kids, for my husband, for our church family, for the volunteers. Watching God move, watching his miracles in person and seeing his provisions and seeing just how much he cares about every little detail. We had one guy on the street pretty early on that we had helped. He and his grandmother getting a new heat pump. It ended up being paid for in its entirety. I won't get into the whole story, but we were talking to him one night and asking him, how are you doing? And he was like, thank you so much. Our house is warm. And we were like, it's not us. It's just God. It's not us. And we said, is there anything you need? And he said, we're good. We're great. He said, except I lost my chickens. And we were like, your chickens? He said, yeah, all my chickens got washed away in the flood. I wish I still had my chickens. And we were like, oh, I'm so sorry. He was like, no, it's fine. That is really the only thing I lost. I am great. We're so blessed. Well, it was like 3 days later, I was checking my Facebook messages. And sometimes I got really funny messages of things that people wanted to donate, or, there was some peculiar stuff. And sometimes I would get tickled. And my husband and I were laying in bed and I'm like going through all the messages. And I busted out laughing. My husband's like, what is it? I said, there is this lady from California. And I start reading the message out loud. And this lady says, hey, I know this is really random, but God's put it on my heart. I have fertilized chicken eggs. Do you know of anybody who needs chicken?
Wow.
And when I read it out loud, I was laughing as I started reading it. And then I remembered the guy on the street and my laughter. I just started bawling because it was like, okay, God, because God cares about every single need. And the message had been sent like 6 hours after we had that conversation in the road with that man. I didn't see it for a few days, but it had been sent that very night. So it has opened our eyes so much to the little things. God cares about you. He cares about your kids. He cares about your car trouble. He cares about your hurting marriage. He cares about your chickens. Like, God cares about everything that matters to you. If it hurts your heart, if it impacts your heart, God cares because he is your father, and not like some of the bad earthly father examples that we have. He's the father who loves you, and he's always waiting with open arms to welcome you back and give you everything you need. And we pray about everything in our family now. I mean, and my kids too, they're like, well, we'll just pray about it, because we've watched God answer so many prayers that it has just strengthened our prayer life so much. It's been incredible. I can't say enough about it. Obviously, I'll have a really hard time not talking about it.
All right, so I have to ask now, because I know there are people who think this. They're thinking, oh, she was just born with that kind of faith. Wish I had that kind of faith. What's your answer to them?
No, I actually, so I am the person who I was actually kicked out of my church and disfellowshipped from my church in 2010. And
Girl.
Yeah. I have been to the bottom of the barrel, lost, running from God, hating Christians. And that is one of the reasons. I mean, I just found my way back to God a few years ago. And when I found my way back to God, I was writing secular fiction, which I hadn't had anything published. When I found my way back to God, I decided I wanted to start writing Christian fiction. And my husband was the same way. We just got married 5 years ago. When we got married, we went to church. We didn't live for God. There's a difference, between going to church and walking with God every day. And we were not walking with God every day. And now, I look at all of the people in the Bible that God showed us, people like Saul, who became Paul, and people like Moses, who wasn't a great speaker, but he led a nation out of Egypt. And you look at David and all of his broken mistakes. I mean, every person that God used, he made it the broken people and the little
Right.
churches and little David, because it's not about the people. It's about God.
Yeah.
And I always try to tell people, I am just proof that God will use the most broken tool for him. And because of the church hurt that I went through, I'm thinking about writing a book on church hurt, because of the church hurt that I went through and the nasty divorce and the hating Christians, because I went through all of that mess, now these thousands of people who are messaging me on Facebook who are struggling with their faith, I can say to them, hey, I've been there. I hated Christians. I walked away from church. I walked away from God. And the people who say, well, I've done too much. Nope. Let me talk to you about what I've done. Now, because of the ugliness and the things that I did, it gives me an opportunity to point people toward him.
Right.
God
That's
redeemed
beautiful.
everything.
Yeah.
Everything in our lives.
Yep.
Whoa. All right.
He can use us. Sorry, I'm like,
Is there,
should have brought some
we've got
Kleenex.
like 3.5 minutes now. And I'm like, there's so much I would love to ask you and so much more I would love to hear. First off, will you come back?
Oh,
at another
absolutely. I
time?
would love to.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We would love that too. I know our viewers would love that. So in the final few minutes we have, what's the one thing that you want our audience to carry away with them today?
That God listens and he cares.
Mm-hmm.
And he's there with you. And when you're facing something that you think is impossible, we all severely underestimate the power of prayer. God can do amazing things when we believe and when we step out in faith. And the world is hurting. So many people are hurting and they need that hope and that assurance. And that every day, I get up at 4:30 every morning now, because I can't miss my time with God. I wasn't doing that before. But that time with God, I've realized, is the most important thing to set me up for the day, because every morning we get up and when our feet hit the floor, we're at spiritual warfare. Like the devil is going to try to trip us up. The enemy is out there. The devil has a plan for our life, but God has a plan for our life too. And when we spend time with him, praying to him and seeking him, he's going to show us what that plan is. So for people who are hurting,
Yeah. And I'd like to add that we have a tendency to think about God and the devil like God is here and the devil's like right here in power. And this is not true. The devil is bluffing. He wants you to think he has that much power so that you will be hopeless against him. But God is so much greater.
That's right.
So much greater. And if we appeal to him and look to him, God will come through and will show you that the devil doesn't have any footing at all.
Nope.
Yeah.
Yep. He's a trickster. if you just understand that he's a trickster, that's the number one thing. If you understand that he is very cunning and he likes to trick people and trip people up, and by staying close to the Lord, pray without ceasing, and always understanding that we really need to stay close to the Lord, the trips will be a lot less, So everyone, we're excited. I have to tell you, we've had author Courtney DAILEY on, and we're talking about her book, God's Story. It's just a fantastic, fantastic author. And again, you can get that on Amazon, Barnes and Noble. Get it there. This is something that would make a great holiday gift. Everybody needs to be uplifted in our world. And this is the type of wonderful writings, God-inspired writings that make a difference in our lives. Thank you so much, Courtney, for being on with us.
Thank you. It's been such a joy being here. Thank you so much for everything you do, shining his light to the world. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you for being with us today and shining his light to us so that we can echo that back to the rest of the world. This has been amazing. And you've been watching the chat session on the This Way Network. We're so glad you're here. Please come back again. We want to bring stories like this every time to uplift you, encourage you, and let you know that you can be of good courage because God is with us and we aren't alone. Thanks everyone for joining us. Don't forget to get Courtney's book, Christmas coming up. If it'd make a great Christmas gift. Just saying.
Yep. Get that book. Get that book. God bless you, everybody, and have a great day. And thank you for watching the chat session here on the This Way Network. See you next Monday.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
God bless.